Good evening, good Vach, Shavua Tov, a good week to you, my holy sisters and brothers. Great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. So late, as always, really honor the East Coast people. And it's a short daf and a single daf, so I won't be keeping you up too late. Let's light up the darkness. Who's in the house? Joe in the Inland Empire, Bella in Florida, Guy in Ohio, Vito, Shalom de Panama, bienvenido Vito, and Ella in Southern California. Let's get busy. We're picking this up right at the very bottom of page 39b. Tonight, we, with God's help, will finish chapter 2 here in Tractate Avoda Zara, the 27th volume of the Talmud. This is the end of Mishna number 6 in chapter 2. We've been talking generally about distancing ourselves from idolaters, the concern that wine of idolaters, Jews can't have anything to do with wine that may have been used in ceremonies of idolatry. And then we started to get into sort of other issues that are related, that cooked food of Gentiles who might be idolaters, that might contain non-kosher food, that might bring us into contact with these people who, especially in this period in history, were very dangerous to the Jews. Bloodshed was, that they would actually be violent against the Jews. Also the concern of intermarriage with the idolaters, etc. And then in the last couple of pages, we've just been talking literally about kashrut, about things that are kosher and things that are not, right? This concern that non-kosher food might be mixed into what would otherwise be kosher food and rendering that kind of food prohibited for that reason. So for a number of reasons, we're looking at foods and substances that are prohibited for Jews for these various reasons. So the Mishna further teaches, and tarit, fish that is not minced, and brine that has fish in it are permitted. Right, so again, here the concern is about food that's kosher versus not kosher. Generally, the Torah says that fish from the sea with fins and scales are kosher, but when you're buying some kind of a fish brine or a fish stew, and you don't know what kind of fish are in it, it could include, for example, catfish, which is not kosher, or other kinds of fish from the sea that don't have scales, even though they have fins, not kosher. Certainly, if it was any kind of, other kind of aquatic life that is not fish. If there was shrimp, there was lobster, those are very not kosher foods. And if there's any concern that some of these might be mixed in, that's going to be a problem and render it prohibited. Also, there's a concern that there might be wine or vinegar in it, and wine and vinegar, which is made from wine of the idolaters, for all the reasons we previously mentioned, would be prohibited and would render this mixture, even of fish, prohibited. So the sages taught what is considered tarit that has not been minced, any fish whose head and spine are recognizable, and what is considered brine that has fish in it, any brine that has 1 kilbit or 2 kilbiyot floating in it. And the Gemara asks, well, now we're on page 48, now that you have said that brine which has 1 kilbit in it is permitted, is it necessary to teach that brine that has 2 kilbiyot in it is also permitted? Why is it permitted? Because you're not sure what this fish brine is made out of, but if you can see the fish that it is made out of, and you can say, well, that is a kosher fish, so this brine is okay. Whereas if you can't see the fish that the brine was made out of, we're going to have to render it prohibited out of uncertainty. So now they're saying, well, if you can see the one fish in it that it's made out of, okay, now it's going to render it permitted. What difference does it make if there's a second fish? That should only confirm, but we already know from the one fish. That's the question now being asked. Right, so now that you have said that brine that has 1 kilbit in it is permitted, is it necessary to teach that brine that has 2 kilbiyot, right, the plural form of kilbit, in it is also permitted? So the Gemara explains that this is not difficult. Here, 2 kilbiyot are required to permit the brine as it is contained in open barrels, but there only 1 is required since it is in sealed barrels. Again, as if we understood better, the sort of shopping practices and storage practices, the way that this fish was distributed in the marketplace, stored, the distribution chain, as it were. When could Jews be certain that no non-kosher substances had been introduced into it? It was stated that Rav Huna says tarit is not permitted for consumption until its head and spine are recognizable. Right? Is it the head and spine of a fish that renders it kosher? No, it's the fins and scales. So why is the head and spine meaningful? Well, because this is, we're not buying whole fish, right? We're buying this brine or stew, something that it's made from a fish, and we need to be able to identify whether it was a kosher fish or not. So to see whether it had fins or scales, seems like they would prefer to see the head and spine of the fish. Rav Nachman says it is permitted if either the head or the spine is recognizable. Rav Ukva Bar Chama raised an objection from a Mishna tractate Chulin, page 59a. And with regard to fish, any that has fins and scales is permitted. That's the Torah law explicit. Evidently, the kashrus, right, the kosher quality of fish, is determined only by its fins and scales, not by its head or spine. So Abaye said when that Mishnah is taught, it is in reference to the ara and falmuda fish, whose heads are similar to the heads of non-kosher fish. Right there, seeing the head or spine is not enough. You need to see whether the fins and scales are present or not. With other kinds of fish, you can see from the head that it's a standard fish, and that's enough to know that it would have fins and scales if you could see the rest of it. The Gemara analyzes the dispute between Rav Huna and Rav Nachman. Rav Yehuda said in the name of Ula, the dispute applies to dipping foods in their brine. But with regard to eating their actual bodies, everyone agrees that it is prohibited until both the head and the spine are recognizable. And the Gemara notes that Rabbi Zara said, originally, I would dip foods in their brine. But once I heard that which Rav Yehuda said in the name of Ula, the dispute is only with regard to dipping foods in their brine, but with regard to eating their actual bodies, everyone agrees that it is prohibited until both the head and the spine are recognizable. I too no longer dip foods in their brine. Rav Papa said the law is that tarit is prohibited until the head and the spine of each and every fish is recognizable. Again, because this fish bears some resemblance to a fish that is not kosher, and so you have to be careful, right? This is a special case because it's a somewhat, liminal case in terms of appearance. So the Gemara raised an objection to Rav Papa's statement from the Baraisa. With regard to pieces of fish that have a sign of kashrut, right, that they're kosher, whether this sign is present in all of them or only in a minority of them, and even if it is present in only one fish out of 100 of them, they're also permitted. And there was an incident involving a certain Gentile who brought a large jug of pieces of fish, and a sign of kashrut was found in one of those pieces of the fish, and Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel permitted the entire jug of fish. And this apparently contradicts Rav Papa's assertion that all the pieces must be recognizable for them to be permitted. Again, it's hard to learn out from these examples because there was particular, what I would say, market conditions there. Right? When Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel encountered this jug of fish pieces, he had reason to say, okay, now I can tell what kind of fish this mixture was made out of. And even though I can only see the marks of a kosher fish in one of these pieces, it's enough for me to permit the whole thing. In another place, in another time, where the Gentiles in that area are accustomed to mixing, let's say crustaceans with fish, this would not be sufficient, right? So there's, we can't learn out the law from this incident. The sages could use it, to establish a precedent for particular conditions. This is why you always, especially with anything having to do with kashrut, check with the Heckscher organization, right? Like the OU, RCC, Star Kosher. There's many organizations in America and around the world that put the kosher mark on something, and what it means is that they have sent their rabbis to inspect the supply chain of that food. And then when there's cases that are a little bit questionable, can we eat this or not, you got to check with your local Orthodox rabbi. Okay, where are we here? Rav Papa interpreted the Baraisa as referring to a case where the pieces correspond to each other, i.e. they fit together so that it is clear that they are all from the same fish. Okay, there's pieces of fish in this brine, but it's all from the same fish. So the Gemara raised the difficulty if that is so. what is the purpose of stating this explicitly? If the pieces correspond to each other, it is obvious that they are permitted, as they evidently come from the same kosher fish. So the Gemara explains that this was taught lest you say. Now one should be concerned that perhaps the pieces merely happen to fit together, and the Baraisa therefore teaches us that in such a case the pieces are permitted. The Gemara relates that there was a certain ship carrying tzachanta, which came to the city of Sikra. And Rav Huna bar Chanana went out and he saw that the fish had scales on them, and he permitted them, as any fish with scales is kosher. You're not going to find a fish with scales and no fins. You will find fish with fins and no scales. Rava said to him, but is there anyone who permits tzachanta in a case like this, where it is from a land where fish with scales are common? And it is very possible that the scales are from kosher fish that had been in the boat previously. The scales got onto the fish that were not kosher. Shofarot went out from the court of Rava to herald a declaration promulgating his ruling, and he thereby prohibited all the fish on that boat. And Shofarot went out from the court of Rav Huna bar Chanana, and he thereby permitted the fish. And the Gemara presents two interpretations of the above ruling. Rav Yirmiyah Difti said, Rav Papi said to me that when Rav Huna bar Chanana permitted the fish on the ship, he was referring only to their brine, but with regard to their bodies, no, he did not permit them. And Rav Ashi said that Rav Papa said to me that when Rav Huna bar Chanana permitted the fish, he was referring even to their bodies. Again, you have a dispute between sages. Do we have enough evidence in this situation to rule that what the final product that's going to reach the Jews contains only kosher fish or not? And they disagreed. Rav Ashi continued, and I do not prohibit the fish, as Rav Papa said to me that Rav Huna permitted it. But I also do not permit the fish, as Rav Yehuda said to me in the name of Ula that the dispute between Rav and Rav Huna bar Chanana is referring to dipping foods in their brine. But with regard to eating their actual bodies, everyone agrees that it is prohibited until both the head and the spine of each and every fish are recognizable. So why would they, in a situation where we don't have enough evidence to eat the fish, the actual meat of the fish, so to speak, they would permit the brine? As far as I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong. I mean, somebody please tell me if I'm wrong. But brine, right? What's that? Basically, the kind of salted water that the fish are soaking in. That you can then, take that brine and do things with it in cooking and use it as a dip, etc. So why would somebody prohibit the fish and permit the brine? Well, you have to recognize that the brine, when we already have a doubt that, we're not sure whether the fish should be permitted or not, but okay, out of doubt, we're going to prohibit the fish. The brine is already one step removed. There's very little traces of the fish in the brine. So once we have an uncertainty further removed from, just a very small amount that be contained in the brine, that might be a reason why they permitted it. Rav Chanana bar Idi said before Rav Ada bar Ahav, and he sat and said with regard to a Gentile who brought a boat that was full of barrels of fish brine, and a kilbit was found in one of the barrels. The law is as follows: if the barrels were open, they are all permitted. If they were closed, then the barrel with the kilbit is permitted, but all the other ones remain prohibited. Rav Ada bar Ahava said to him, from where do you know this? And Rav Chanana bar Idi responded, I heard this from 3 verses, i.e. great sages upon whom I can rely, as though their statements were recorded in verses of scripture. And who were they? From Rav and Shmuel and Rabbi Yochanan. New topic. The Gemara discusses the law with regard to other parts of fish. Rav Baruna says that Rav says fish intestines and their roe, right, R-O-E, the eggs, right, like, caviar is a typical kind of fish roe. Or when you go to a sushi restaurant, right, they have fish roe, so fish eggs. Are fish eggs permitted? Are fish eggs permitted? Well, if it's coming from a non-kosher fish, definitely not. If it's coming from a kosher fish, let's keep reading. Rav Baruna says that Rav says, fish intestines and their roe may be purchased only from an expert. Ula raised a contradiction to Rabbi Dostai of Biri. From the fact that Rav says fish intestines and their roe may be purchased only from an expert, it may be inferred that a non-kosher fish has roe, as otherwise there would be no reason to permit only roe purchased from an expert. So there is roe, like, fish eggs that come from non-kosher fish, and that is prohibited. And the Gemara raised a contradiction to this claim from the following Baraisa: a non-kosher fish gives birth, whereas kosher fish lay eggs. We're going to disagree with that in a moment. So there is fish eggs that you can eat, and there's fish eggs that you can't eat. And that's why you need to purchase from an expert who can assure you that the roe that you'll be eating is from a kosher fish. Rabbi Dostai accepted this opinion and said, delete the phrase their roe from here. So Rabbi Zara said to him, do not delete it, as both kosher and non-kosher fish are fish that lay, i.e. produce eggs. But this kosher fish propagates externally by laying eggs in the water, which later hatch. And that non-kosher fish propagates internally by keeping the eggs in its own body until they develop. Nevertheless, both of them do produce roe. And there is therefore reason to be concerned that a Jew might purchase non-kosher roe. The Gemara asks, but even so, why do I need an expert? Let one check the signs of kashrut on the roe itself. As it is taught in a baraisa, like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish. What? Right? I mean, fish eggs are really different than bird eggs. So what's going on here? The Gemara interjects, does it enter your mind to say that the signs of kashrut for fish are the same as the signs of kashrut for eggs, like bird eggs? This is not so, as the signs of kosher fish are the possession of fins and scales, as written in the Torah with regard to them. Rather, the Baraisa means to say, like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish roe. But still, what? How could that be? They're so different. And the Baraisa continues, and these are the signs of bird eggs that are kosher for eating. Any egg that narrows at the top and is rounded at the other end, so that one of its ends is wide and the other one of its ends is pointed. This is a kosher egg. If both the ends are sharp or both of its ends are wide, it is not kosher. If the yolk is on the outside and the albumin is on the inside, not kosher. If the albumin is on the outside and the yolk is on the inside, kosher, like a chicken egg. If the yolk and the albumin are mixed with each other, this is the egg of a creeping animal, not kosher. Considering that one can easily determine the kashrut of bird eggs, why are only those purchased from an expert permitted? Well, we can easily say that we can figure out if a bird egg is kosher or not. And now they're telling us that the signs of fish roe, whether it's kosher or not, is similar to bird eggs. So if that's the case, why do we need an expert to tell us whether this roe, these eggs of fish, is kosher or not? So Rava says that Rav's ruling refers specifically to a case where the eggs have melted together, sounds awful, with fish roe, and it is impossible to determine whether or not they are kosher based on these signs. Yeah, I'm feeling like if the fish roe eggs have melted together, I'm not eating that no matter what. The Gemara asks, but according to the opinion of Rabbi Dostai of Biri, who accepted the idea that non-kosher fish do not lay eggs and says, delete from here the phrase their roe, well, this is still difficult. So the Gemara elaborates, but isn't it taught in the Baraisa as it was interpreted above? Like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish eggs. So apparently the Baraisa assumes that non-kosher fish roe, or eggs, exists. So the Gemara answers, didn't you yourself find it necessary to explain and reinterpret the Baraisa as it cannot be understood according to its straightforward meaning? So Rabbi Dostai can also explain the Baraisa so that it effectively reads, like the signs of bird eggs, so are the signs of fish intestines. Accordingly, the Baraisa never actually means fish roe at all. Yeah, but what do you mean? The signs of bird eggs, we're going to use that to interpret whether fish intestines are kosher or not? We're confused. We're on page 40b. The Gemara raised the difficulty, but where do you find that one of the signs of fish intestines is that they must be round and pointed like bird eggs? And the Gemara answers, yes, you find this with regard to the swim bladder of fish, which is considered to be kosher if it is shaped like a kosher egg. Who knew? The Gemara asks, if there is no expert there and one cannot determine whether or not the fish roe is kosher, then what is the law? And Rabbi Yehuda says that once the seller says, I salted the fish from which this roe came, and they were kosher, well then the roe is permitted. You can have good enough reason to trust that the seller pulled this roe himself from a kosher fish, and therefore the eggs are kosher for eating. So that's the bottom line. Did the fish roe come from a kosher fish? If so, you can eat the eggs. But can you be sure that it came from a kosher fish? Rav Nachman says the roe is prohibited until the seller shows the kosher fish to the buyer and says, these are the fish and these are their intestines. That is, the roe is permitted only if the seller can present the fish that produced it. And the Gemara relates, Rav Yehuda instructed Ada, his attendant, once the seller says, I personally salted them, then they are permitted. And the Mishnah teaches, and the leaf of, back to our Mishnah number 6 here in chapter 2, we're getting away from fish and fish eggs. And the leaf of a chiltit plant is permitted. So the Gemara asks, since the previous Mishnah on page 35b prohibited a sliver of chiltit only due to the concern that it might have been sliced with a non-kosher knife which the Gentile used to cut other non-kosher foods, is it obvious that a leaf which has not been sliced is permitted? If the only reason we're prohibiting this vegetable is because it might have been cut by a non-kosher knife that came into contact with non-kosher meat, let's say, well, what if this vegetable is uncut? Why would we prohibit it? There's no concern that it came into contact with that knife. And the Gemara answers, it is necessary to teach this only with regard to the slivers of chiltit that might be found on the leaf, lest you say that one should be concerned that perhaps the Gentile might bring slivers sliced with a non-kosher knife and mix it with the slivers on the leaf. And the Mishnah therefore teaches us that it is assumed that the slivers on the leaf had stuck to it and came off with the plant when it was pulled from the ground, and we need not be concerned about the kosher knife. The non-kosher knife. The Mishnah the Mishnah teaches, and rolled olive cakes. And the Gemara asks, isn't it obvious that these are permitted? For what reason might they be prohibited? And the Gemara answers, no, it is necessary to teach that they are permitted, even though they are very soft, lest you say that there is a concern that they became softened because the Gentile placed wine in them. Back to the wine of idolaters. The Mishnah therefore teaches us that these olives have softened due to the oil that they possess, not because the Gentile introduced wine to them. The Mishnah further teaches, and Rabbi Yosef says, overripe olives are prohibited. And the Gemara asks, what are overripe olives like? And Rabbi Yosef Bar Chanina says, this is referring to any olive that if one grasps it in his hand, its pit slips out due to the softness of the olive. Why would we be concerned? What's wrong with an overripe olive? It might have become overripe due to the introduction of vinegar made from wine. We have that in the note. I'm almost done. Questions or comments, please get them in now. The Mishnah teaches locusts that have come from a salesman's basket are prohibited, while those that come from the storeroom are permitted. Okay, locusts. So we're talking about the types of grasshoppers that are permitted, right? There are some that are prohibited, some that are permitted. So obviously we're talking about the ones that are permitted, so that there's even a question here. And so interesting, the salesman, we're talking here about a Gentile salesman. So if it's in his basket, let's say in the marketplace or in the store, prohibited. But if it comes from his storeroom out back, permitted. Why would that be? Answer, when he's presenting them to the public for sale that day and he wants to make more sales, what does he do? He introduces a little bit of wine into them. But the ones in the storeroom, because they have to last for a long time, he doesn't introduce wine to those, and that's why they would be permitted. Locusts that come from a salesman's basket are prohibited, while those that come from the storeroom are permitted. And the sages taught in the Baraisa, locusts, caper buds, and leeks that come from the storehouse and from the storeroom and from a Gentile's ship are all permitted. Those that are sold in the market from baskets that are in front of the storekeeper are prohibited, because it is assumed that the Gentile storekeeper sprinkles wine upon them. And similarly, with regard to apple wine that belongs to Gentiles, those that come from the storehouse or from the storeroom or from the salesman's basket are permitted. Apple wine that is sold in the market is prohibited because they mix grape wine of the Gentiles into it. And there is a relevant incident. The sages taught once Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, felt discomfort in his stomach, and he just knew, that apple wine would alleviate it. And he said, isn't there any person who knows whether apple wine of Gentiles is prohibited or permitted? I'm fascinated by this because, he knows, he has an instinct, what will cure him. Okay, I get that, right? Sometimes your body just tells you what you need. But this is Rebbe, right? The great sage who redacted the Mishna. And the question isn't, can somebody get me apple wine? The question is, can somebody tell me whether apple wine is permitted or not? Okay, so, he just didn't happen to know the law himself. But it's interesting that not knowing whether it's permitted or not, how did he have the instinct that it would heal him? Has he ever had it before? Did he have apple wine that was made by Jews, so he knew what apple wine was about, and so he could have an instinct whether it would heal him or not? But I guess now in his situation, there's no apple wine made by Jews available. So there is apple wine made by Gentiles, and that's why he doesn't know whether he can take it or not, and he's asking. So Rabbi Yishmael ben Rabbi Yosei said before him, once my father felt discomfort in his stomach, and they brought him apple wine of Gentiles that was 70 years old, and he drank it, and he was cured. Rebbe said to him, you had so much in your hand, meaning so much knowledge in your hand, that could have relieved me, and yet you caused me to suffer by withholding it until now? I guess it took a while to get this answer. They checked and found one Gentile who had 300 large jugs of apple wine that was 70 years old. And Rebbe drank from it, and he was cured. And he said, blessed is the omnipresent who delivered his universe to keepers. Rebbe thanked God for causing the Gentile to keep the wine for 70 years so that it could be used to heal him. And finally, the Mishnah further taught, and likewise with regard to teruma, right? So teruma, the first 2% of the produce in the land of Israel when the temple is standing, and it's given to a Kohen, right, to a priest. Only priests can eat teruma. Both the teruma and the priest have to be in a state of tahara, ritual purity, when he's eating the teruma. When you give your tithing, right, you give the teruma to a priest, does he own it? Obviously, you just gave it to him. Can he sell it? Yes, he can, because he owns it. Can he sell it to a Yisrael, right? In other words, to a Jew who is not a priest, who's not a Kohen? No. I mean, I guess he could sell it to a Yisrael, but the Yisrael can't consume it. Only a priest can consume teruma. So what's interesting is that this is the choicest part of the produce, but because it can only be eaten by priests, its value is diminished. You can't sell it to other Jews. So if a priest receives produce as teruma, more than he needs, and then he'd like to sell it, but its value is reduced because he can only be consumed by other priests. On the other hand, if he doesn't tell the people he's selling it to that it's teruma, he could get more money for it. That would be a sin. That would be a falsehood. That would be a very unscrupulous thing to do. But it's possible. So in the same way that we're concerned about, does the produce that we're buying, does it have, something not kosher in it? We're also concerned that it has teruma in it, which is actually prohibited for a non-priest to eat. And so about that. And likewise with regard to teruma. And the Gemara asks, what is the meaning of the statement, and likewise with regard to teruma? And Rav Sheshes says this means, and likewise the same law applies to a priest who is suspected of selling teruma, which is less expensive, that he's passing it off as non-sacred food, chulin, right? Non-sacred means that pretending it's not teruma. It is only when the food is in front of the priest that it is prohibited, but food that comes from the storehouse or from the storeroom or from a salesman's basket is permitted. And the reason is that the priest is fearful because he thinks to himself, if I sell teruma in public, the sages will hear of it and deprive me of all my wares. And that concludes chapter 2 here in Tractate Avoda Zara. Tomorrow, the regular time on Sunday, we'll pick it up with the Mishna number 1 in chapter 3. Just a couple of comments. Joe, could eggs be deemed non-kosher if it is obvious that they are ready to hatch? Fish fry, the babies can be seen within prior to hatching. Bird eggs can be candled to see if there's a developing chick. An egg is deemed non-kosher if there's a blood spot in it, so shouldn't an egg with a partially developed bird be non-kosher too? I mean, I just don't know. This is not something that I've learned recently. You're exactly right. If an egg, a regular chicken egg, has even a spot of blood in it, not kosher, you can't eat it. And that's why when we're making scrambled eggs, we first break open the eggs and just put them in a glass, examine, no blood spot. Okay, put it in this glass. Break the next egg. And all the eggs, you have to examine them one by one before we, mix it up and make scrambled eggs. Once the chick hatches, then it's a bird, right? It's a very young bird, but it's a young kosher bird. I don't think there's any, as far as I know, there's no law against eating young chickens. We eat chicken. So if it's like an actual chick that's still in the egg, can we eat that? I follow your logic. I just don't know offhand what the rule is on that. You're probably right, but I just don't know. And interesting with the fish, if the eggs come from a kosher fish, so is there any stage as the eggs are becoming, fish that are about to hatch, does that mean we can't eat that? Or since they're, just as soon as they're born, they're fish that we can eat, can we eat them even when the fish are visible in the egg? It's a great question. I don't know the answer. And Ilanit, Shavua Tov from Silver Spring, the month of Av and the 9 days have begun. That's exactly right. So this is a period where we really, we're mourning the loss of the temple. Are we mourning the loss of a beautiful building? No. There are many beautiful buildings in Israel. There are many beautiful buildings in America. What we're mourning is this place where there was a visible, manifest connection between us and our Father in heaven, and the ability to fulfill a bunch, like many commandments that are in the Torah, that in the absence of the temple, we cannot fulfill those commandments. And the fact that the temple is absent means that, there's it's not broken, it's not ripped apart, right? But there's a wound in the connection between us and our Father in heaven, right? Like we did not merit to maintain, the holy temple in our midst because of all the different things that are, that we, in the form of our ancestors, but it's really collective we, strayed from Torah observance. And so if we could, one of the ways that our sages teach, right, that we can bring Mashiach sooner is that basically the more mitzvahs that Jews do around the world, right, the more we enhance and heal the connection between God and the Jewish people, and the sooner Mashiach will come. And the sooner, and even in the interim, that we don't have to go all the way to, I wish Mashiach would come right now. But even between now and then, the more mitzvahs that Jews are doing, the more Torah that we are learning, the more sort of God's pleasure comes into the world, and good things can happen. It's not an exact one-to-one correspondence. Who can know everything that's going on in the world and even within the Jewish world? But this is something that we can do, and the more of it we do, the better. So I heard Rabbi Halberstam, who spoke to our Kahil, our congregation tonight at the third meal of Shabbos, and he says that during these 9 days, we should each of us try to take at least one of the mitzvahs that we do and infuse it with greater intentionality, greater spirituality. We should ask ourselves, well, Mashiach had come, right? When Mashiach comes, the whole idea is when the Messiah comes, God's presence will be revealed throughout the world. God's presence, God's revealed presence will fill the world the way the water fills the sea. So if you and I, God is here right now. God is always here, right? we always speak about God like God's not in the room, but God is in the room with us right now. He's in your room, he's in my room. We are in God. It's not that God is in our room, we are in God. But because he's very quiet, we're human, and it's easy for us to forget. But if God's presence was absolutely manifest right now, if it was obvious to you and to me that we were sitting in God's throne room, so to speak, how would we behave differently? Right? How would we wear our tefillin differently? How would we pray differently? How would we say a blessing before we eat some bread at dinner differently? So he says, take at least one of the mitzvahs that you do and try to, do it the way you would do it if Mashiach was already here. And I don't even know exactly what that means, but he says, ask yourself that question, challenge yourself, and make that mitzvah the way you would do it if Mashiach was already here, if God's presence was already revealed in the world. And that would be a good thing to do all the time, but especially in these 9 days. And I'll just mention that next Saturday night, right, a week from tonight, we'll be going from Shabbos into Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, saddest day in the Jewish calendar, a full day fast like Yom Kippur. We'll read Lamentations, and what we don't do on the night of Tisha B'Av is study regular Torah, the way like we do here, this Daf Yomi Shir. We have to read Eich at that time, at the end of Shabbos, so we won't have class that night. We won't have class a week from tonight. I thought about just reading the parts of Torah that we can do, so we can do that together, but we'd be starting so late because after Shabbos we have to go read Lamentations in Shul. It'd be just very, very late. So we won't have class next Saturday night. Then on Sunday at our regular time, 6 p.m. This is not tomorrow. This is a week from tomorrow when it's Tisha B'Av. We'll be weak. We'll be fasting. And some people don't learn, regular Torah sort of all day on Tisha B'Av, but there's enough opinions that afternoon, right, in the afternoon of Tisha B'Av, sort of some of those rules are a little bit eased. And we will go back and do our daf on Sunday afternoon, right, 6 p.m. Pacific. On the East Coast, you guys will already be out of Tisha B'Av. But that's the plan, right? So that's all for next week. That's all for next week. For this week, tomorrow, 6 p.m. Pacific, regular class. And have a great week and a meaningful week, even though we're in the 9 days. All the best.